Alright, so today is part 2 of our honey harvest. And it's about how we get from here to there. Watch the video. So I just wanted to explain what I'm looking for when I'm going in the boxes, the honey supers is what we call them, and pulling the frames out and looking at them and kind of inspecting them. The frames will either have nothing in them when we start off with and just give them to the bees and they'll start developing comb right here and then drop it all the way to the bottom. We can use these type of frames for cut comb. They're hard to spin and try to get the honey out. It's not impossible, but the centrifuge will actually cause the comb to break and come apart in the centrifuge. So we typically don't like using those. But the bees tend to like these frames better. Here's an example where they just started. They haven't finished it. We pulled it out early. We typically don't like to spin those. We'll use them for a cut comb. So what we're looking for is frames like this. They have the plastic foundation, wax coated. The bees will start building their comb right on this, and it's super strong for spinning and it won't come apart. So there's a lot of variables that you got to look at when we're spinning honey, because it's not that simple. You can't just put it in there and start centrifuging it. So we do have black foundation, yellow foundation. It is hard to tell sometimes if it's yellow foundation when they build all the comb out, because it's damn near the same color. So I kind of look in the corners to see if there's any foundation in there when it's full of honey. If there is, we'll spin it. If there's not, then we'll save it for cut comb. Anyway, that's what we look for. Got a lot going on in this room right now. I'm getting ready to harvest the honey out of the frames, and I was gonna shut the dehydrator off, but I'm not going to, because it's keeping the temperature in here a little over 80 degrees, which is gonna help with the extraction of the honey. So anyway, I'll probably narrate the rest of this, but here we go. Okay, this is the first frame of the season for me, so it's been a while. I'm going to struggle with it a little bit, trying to learn camera angles. I'm just used to cutting it towards myself and watching, but yeah, I'm going to struggle a little bit here. Anyway, I showed you the knife, and there's a reason for that. I use a serrated bread knife, a long one. They work really good. We've tried hot knives, pokers, a few other things, but we found out that the bread knife works really good, especially if you're doing all this by hand. We don't have any mechanical decappers. So what I'm doing here is pulling the caps off the honey, because if you don't do that, the honey will not come out. So we're cutting off the caps. The cappings are going into the bucket there, and we'll use that for later. The honey will drip in there, and we'll capture it later. But the one thing I will note, I'm using a real thin bread knife here, and I figured out if I use my thicker, the wider bread knife, the cappings won't stay on the frame like you see there. So I have to come back with my capping comb here and scrape everything off, and then get all the wax cappings that I didn't cut off because they're lower than the frame. So you saw the knife going across, and all we're doing is going from wood frame to wood frame, and going back and forth with the knife, cutting down or up. Up is actually better. You'll see that in my last video. So that's basically it. We're just uncapping and getting ready to put it in the centrifuge. So as soon as I finish up here, pulling all the wax cappings off, I'll stick it in my centrifuge here. My centrifuge is a 2-frame centrifuge electric, a variable speed, and you have to have 2 frames in there or it'll throw it off balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on low speed and try to extract honey from the first side about halfway, and then I'll rotate. I wish I had a better picture, but where the arrow is, the honey is actually coming out, hitting the sidewalls, and then going down to the bottom. You can see up at the top, the upper arrow, where the honey's actually spinning in the bottom. That means there's too much honey, and it's time for me to start draining it. So here I am checking it. They're about halfway spun on the first side, and I'm flipping it around to start spinning on the second side. So I'll do this 3 times, which I'll explain here next. So one of the things I wanted to explain is why I rotate it so much in the centrifuge. It was a lesson that we learned early on, learning how to spin honey. So when we take the caps off on either side and put it in the centrifuge, honey only comes out of one side. So there's about 2.5 pounds of honey on each side of the comb. So when I first stick it in the centrifuge, I run it on a real low speed and try to get at least half the honey off of the one side. And then I'll rotate it in the centrifuge and then do the same thing on the other side. So what that does is it lightens up one side and allows us to spin faster and all the way out on the second side. Once we get about halfway, then we can turn up the speed on the centrifuge and get the rest of the honey out. So I rotate it 3 times. One time, get half one side out. The second time, to start getting the honey off the second side, we'll get it all the way out at full speed, and then we'll flip it again and finish off this side. And the reason why we do that is if you don't, it'll actually pull these foundations out of the frames, and it could break them because the speed's so fast in there. Okay, so I'm done spinning the frames. I'm going to show you here what the frames look like after all the honey's out. So these are completely clean. You see a couple red spots in there? That's packed pollen. It's dry. It stays in there. The bees will, I'll put it back in the honey boxes and the bees will use it later on. But anyway, here's some of the cappings. So they just go onto the screen and then the honey drips through into the bottom, and we'll collect it later. And pretty soon those cappings will be all dry. Once it's dry, we'll melt them down and make beeswax bars. Okay, so here I'm opening up the honey gate and letting the honey flow into the set of screens. They're not filters, they're just screens. Just to kind of take out the bulk of the wax cappings that's left behind. And sometimes there's a bee wing or leg or whatever. This will capture everything in those screens. So it goes through the screens into the bucket, and then from the bucket we go bottling. So any pollen or anything beneficial all goes through the screens, and it's still in the honey, which is beneficial. So anyway, you see me here. You can tell I'm getting a lot faster. It's later in the day. I think this is like the last 5 frames. Anyway,
it's going a lot faster. I don't have to do as much cleanup, and I'm happy about that.
So you saw in the video, that was the last frame. I had to cut the caps off. I spun it out, and then I cleaned out the centrifuge, let everything go into the bucket. The bucket was full, and then I go right into bottling right afterwards. And that's the next step we'll go into. It was a long day, so I waited until the next day. And what I do is I put a heating pad around the bucket. I just keep it on low through the course of the night. Because like I said earlier, the room was actually got up to about 90 degrees. So it was perfect. I didn't want my honey to cool down for bottling. So I just put a heating blanket on it and throughout the night so it'd stay warm. And then went to bottling. And that's where we're going now.
Alright, so we're into bottling. It's pretty simple. Just open up the gate and start filling bottles. One thing we got to make sure is keeping everything at least 1 pound or above, because in the state of California we got to sell it by the pound. So anyway, that's what we're doing. You see me pull a spray bottle over and spray it into the rag on there, and I'm wiping everything down. That is brewing sanitizer, which is just a little bit of sanitizer with some water, and I just like everything sanitary, so that's what I do. Plus it keeps everything from being a sticky mess. Just through the course of the day, you're gonna get honey everywhere. This just kind of eliminates it. You see me with the popsicle stick, catching the drips on the side, because when the bucket is full, there's a lot of weight there pushing against that honey gate, so it does tend to drip off to the sides a little bit. That part will start slowing down as the level comes down in the bucket. Anyway, you see me measuring everything. I don't do every bottle. I just kind of see where the honey level is in the neck of the bottle, and I weigh it, check it, and then I'll continue on. I'll do about 10 bottles, and then I'll check the weight again. But as long as I'm over 1 pound, I'm legal. So that's just what I'm doing here. Okay, so I switched over to the taller glass bottles. They are a little bit more of a pain in the butt to fill because the neck of them is a little smaller. But I do the same thing. I check the weight. So what I'll do here is I'll set up my scale, put an empty bottle on, I'll tear it out, and then check the weight of it. And I write on my labels 1.2 pounds. There's actually probably 1.28 or 1.3 pounds in each of those bottles. So here you'll notice I left a full bottle right next to my filling station. And what I do that for is just to kind of give me an eyeball of where my level is. So that bottle that's next to it was at least 1.2 pounds. So if I go a little bit over, I know I'm good. So once I'm done here, I'll do like I always do. I'll clean up everything and get things ready for the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up here. Don't need to spare you all the details of cleaning up and everything. And we'll move right on into labeling.
Okay, so I got done bottling. I washed everything down, took all my equipment, washed it all down, get it ready for the next harvest. And then I took a little break, and then I went right into labeling. Set up everything on the counter here. and that's what we're going to do next is labeling.
Okay, so here we're moving into labeling, and you see me spraying the bottles again. Always wiping them down. It is Star Sands, a brewing sanitizer that I use. It's a light mixture. I'm always trying to keep things clean and sanitized. Plus, it helps with the adhesion of the labels. But I'm also doing an inspection on each of the bottles. If you see me looking at them there, I'm checking them out. Because sometimes things do get missed in the screening process. And I want to make sure that none of my honey that goes out to friends or family, there's anything in the honey. It could be a wing or something. But anyway, it could be just a piece of wax. I still don't want that going out. I like my bottles to be clean and look presentable. So here you see me pull a cardboard, I guess it's a template or a jig that I made. Anyway, it just helps me be consistent on where my label is being placed on the glass bottles. I use that cardboard template for a couple other bottles that I use for other products, so it's really good. One thing about me, I want to be as consistent as possible. We're not about quantity here at Clement's Family Farms. We're about quality, because we don't produce a lot of honey throughout the year, but I want to make sure our honey is good. I am putting my name on it, and we do care about what we're presenting to our friends and family. So yeah, I'm going to continue on here, spraying the bottles down, wiping them, and labeling until I'm finished. And then we'll go on to the sealing part. It's kind of the last little touch on the glass bottles. It makes a nice presentation. Plus, I like the way they look when they're finished. So anyway, this is the sealing part. Put the seal on, and then I'll hold it down when I first start the heat process. If I don't, they tend to rise up a little bit. So yeah, every one of them's got to be pushed down. And then I just put the heat gun to it. The heat gun shrinks it up and makes a really nice seal, and it looks fantastic when it's done. So that's pretty much it.
All right, we're here at the end. Everything's labeled, bottled, and ready to go. So if you notice my labels, they're different. They're different than all the other honey labels. I put a lot of thought into it, and I didn't want to be like anybody else. Everybody else has got bees and flowers, anything that's, you know, honey related. I didn't want to do that. So yeah, we got the steer skull. It's kind of my brand. I've been making brands for a long time, and the steer skull is one of them that I brand almost everything. The drawing on it is actually one of my art pieces that I did a few years ago. So I'm kind of proud of it. I really like it. It's not perfect, but I don't like perfect. So anyway, that's how we got it. If you have any comments on this video, please leave it down below. Like and share. If you want to see something about the bees or anything that we do, please comment below. And we appreciate everybody support. So thanks. We'll see you on the next video. So I'm going to spare you the details of the 21 frames in the... Ah, shit. Just leave it. So I just. Oh my god. On the video, once the bucket's full, I clean out the spinner. Time's out, getting them ready to,